Hello everybody and happy new year. To start off 2017 I figured why not go with a top 5 video, so today I'm going to do just that. So I'll be listing the fights that I love the most, and also to clarify right from the start, I'll start with an anime only top 5 because animated fights compared to fights in the manga, as long as they stay completely canon, are just better. After I've given you my top 5 picks from the anime, I will give you a few examples from the manga, but since we pretty much only have 2 arcs in the manga that the anime hasn't covered yet, then yeah, expect a lot of Alvarez. Another thing to mention, of course, is that although I've only picked 5 fights from the anime, there are a lot of fantastic fights out there that I love, and quite a few that almost ended up on this list in fact, so keep that in mind. Okay, without further ado, let's get started with the top 5 list from the anime, shall we? At number 5, Mira Jane activating Satan's Soul versus Freed during the Battle of Fairy Tail. So I remember from the very first time this fight kicked off in the anime, and holy shit, it got my blood flowing. I mean, this was the very first time we got to see Mira Jane's magic in action, since she was in her kind, peaceful state up until that point when Elfman's life was threatened by Freed. Mira Jane couldn't take it, especially after losing Lysana already, so she just went all in on Freed without holding back in the slightest, and as a result, this fight was over before it began. Okay, next on this list, at number 4, Natsu using Dragon Force for the first time to win against Jalal. This fight is the most iconic fight for me in all of Fairy Tail, and probably for a lot of more people too. To understand that had this list been iconic fights, this would be on the top without question, but since this list is my favorite fights, it's not quite up there unfortunately. That said, it's still a very dope fight, although pretty short-lived, but to me, long fights are not necessary to make them crazy good. This is such an example. I mean, when he tapped into Dragon Force, that's all she wrote. The battle was already won, much like in Mirajin vs Freed's case. I mean, the fact that Natsu went through so much trouble to win this battle, he ate a shard of the friggin' Etherion Tower. That could potentially have killed him, but instead it fueled him to a whole new tier of strength, even if it was only temporary. This is, however, to date in the anime, my second favorite fight of Natsu, but there is one that I rank higher, and we'll be getting there shortly. Okay, so moving on to number 3. Loxus vs Hades during the S-Class trials. When things are looking bad for Fairy Tail in the fight against Hades, and Natsu even faced death, Loxus steps between the defenseless Natsu and the powerhouse Hades. And from that point we get one of the most epic fights in the anime. I mean, if you are a Laxus boy, then I can completely understand if you put this on number 1, because it is absolutely crazy. I mean, this fight was anything but one-sided. Even though Laxus gave in at the end, while on his feet, Hades got a run for his money for sure, and this was probably the first time we got to see Laxus' real strength in action. I mean, when he fought Natsu and Gajeel during the Battle of Fairy Tail, he was like consumed by rage and shit, so something tells me he was holding back quite a bit. After all, Natsu defeated him in the end, and I don't need to tell you that Natsu couldn't have beaten Laxus we saw during the fight against Hades. Okay, coming at number 2, Natsu vs Jackal. This one may or may not surprise some people, but this is my absolute favorite Natsu fight in the anime ever. Call it one-sided if you want, but it doesn't change the fact that Natsu truly showed Tartarus not to fuck with Fairy Tail. And he did this by beating the shit out of Jackal right from the start in almost every single fight that Natsu has been fighting. Even in the manga, he's been messing about in the beginning until things look dire, but against Jackal, Natsu went fucking ballistic right away. I mean, he did in the manga too, but yeah. There wasn't any room for Jackal to counter him at all. But Natsu did get his share of pounding as well through the explosion curse of Jackal, of course, so in that sense it was not very one-sided, at least not the first time when he actually got knocked the fuck out. Alright. Let's move on to the best fight in the anime so far, for me at least, and this is a fight that nobody is going to be able to guess. Trust me on this. If you successfully guess without me having told you, you're cheating, because it kind of breaks the pattern I've been giving you so far in this video, and yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, you cannot guess this one. Alright, anyway, let's go, shall we? At number 1 in the anime, we have Wendy versus Shelia, that is right. The Dragon Slayer of Wind versus the God Slayer of Wind. I seriously don't think I've ever enjoyed watching an animated fight in Fairy Tail like this one before. Like you actually had no idea who was going to win this fight, since Fairy Tail had a pattern of losing in the GMG tournament, and after giving it their all, it ends in a draw. I really like this fight for another reason as well, and that is that we get to see Wendy fight properly without any help from Natsu or anyone else, because before this we never really got to see Wendy fend for herself. There was always someone teaming up with her since she was little, and she did so well against Shelia on her own. The fact that she didn't lose tells us that she's not just some supportive dragon slayer. She will one day be pretty fucking strong. And when the battle is over, Wendy and Shelia become best friends, so that's what I call a battle. This fight reminded us what Fairy Tail truly is. A series that wants to connect people. Alright, this is my list on top 5 fights in the anime of Fairy Tail. But I believe I promised some manga as well, right? So if you're an anime only and don't want to be spoiled, well, this is your chance to click off. But if you feel like staying, please do. Alright, let's go, shall we? At number 5. Loxus vs Wall. Now, I'm not a big Loxus guy, but this fight was fucking lit. Lightning versus Machine. And Loxus got a pretty good beating at first. Wall got a beating of his own too, but what makes this fight even more interesting is the fact that Loxus' body starts acting up from the shit that he suffered during the Tartarus arc, which puts Loxus at a disadvantage. Of course, in the end, Loxus actually has some help by Freed's magical barrier, which puts Wall and Loxus back on the same level kinda. Well, I say the same level. Loxus fucking obliterates Wall by unlocking a new lightning, a red lightning that he inherits by his ancestor Yuri Dryar. And as a result, well, Wall actually dies because we of course later find out that Wall is a Historia by Nineheart. Alrighty then, at number 4. Natsu and Lucy versus Jacob. Now, I generally just call this Natsu vs Jacob, even though Lucy did play her part because, well, Lucy didn't actually do that much. It really puts her relevance into perspective, I suppose. Anyway, so this fight was probably one of my favorite fights in the manga because it had a mixture of comedic value while still being a serious battle. It starts off mostly serious, but we later find out that Jacob has a like a good view on women, I guess you could call it. So he can't look at a woman all naked, like yeah, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but this is where the comedic value comes in because we of course have Natsu trying his very best to get Jacob to open his eyes, while Jacob tries his best to keep his eyes closed as best he can, and this allows Natsu the window of opportunity that he needs to win. But he doesn't win just like that. When the rest of the guild is finally returned, Natsu wipes Jacob out in about one hit after being sent into the sky along with Jacob so that Natsu doesn't destroy the whole guild hall. That's pretty much what he's waiting for. I mean, he can't go all out in the guild hall against Jacob. Now for number 3. Brandish and Lucy bath scene. Now this is probably going to have a lot of people thinking like, what the fuck? But trust me, this is a fight in its own right. This is not a comedic fight, of course, with almost no seriousness involved, but it's a fight alright. I mean, Brandish literally shrinks the neighbor house just because Lucy isn't obeying her. Isn't that enough to call it a fight? I'd say so. And at the very end, after all the funny shit is over, Brandish goes all crazy and tries to crush Lucy by shrinking the house they're in. But Lucy, of course, escapes death. And at the end, Kana ends up knocking Brandish out while Brandish suffers from sneezing or something because of Agil's sandstorm. Anyway, yeah, as figured, this is a fucking great fight, man. Number 2. Gajil versus Bradman. As far as Alvarez goes, at least so far in the arc, this is one of the best fights I've ever seen, even if it is just still frames from the manga, which makes me want the anime to kick off even sooner. We find out that Gajil is facing off an opponent who can use the abilities of all the Tartaros members, as we see him do. He even ends up using Silver's attacks. But as the fight goes on, Gajeel gets the upper hand as he unlocks his Dragon Force at last. Well, we can at least assume it is Dragon Force. I don't think it's actually been confirmed. But after winning, Gajeel is sucked into the underworld or whatever along with Bradman. But of course, we know that was just another of Hero's attempts of trolling us to think he died. Now for number one in the whole series, anime, manga, like there's nothing that compares to this fight, and that fight is Grey Fullbuster versus Natsu Dragneel. This is the biggest fight of Fairy Tail for me, most likely because I'm a Natsu fanboy, probably, but there are so many factors why I put this on number one. First of all, the fight itself was crazy good looking, there was almost no talking, just aggressive attack after attack. This was just a perfect way to describe how serious they both were with each other. Another reason why I put Natsu vs Grey on top is because we finally got to see e.n.d awake, well kinda. Some kind of mid-stage of e.n.d was given to us and it was enough because holy shit, that shit made Natsu look sick. Those black claws and the black flames together with his regular flames, not to mention the blacked out part of his face around the eyes, making Natsu look menacing as fuck. And lastly, the third big factor that I'm using here is that it's Grey versus Natsu, simple as that. Two best friends going ham on each other like their lives depended on it. I appear to have reached the end of this list. I hope you enjoyed. And now you know my personal favorite fights in Fairy Tail from both the anime and the later arcs of the manga. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'd love to hear your favorite fights in the anime and the manga. And if you did, please like this video if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new to this channel. Bye bye!